Technology has empowered employees and employers to work virtually anywhere. Once you make the decision to offer alternative work schedules, what's next? SBM is regularly coming out with new issues and compliance for small business owners to manage. Sarah, what kinds of resources do you have to offer small businesses that can help us manage these new compliance issues?
Well, we know that small business owners are really too busy to pay attention to all the different issues that come up. And oftentimes we call it like the alphabet soup of compliance issues. We have ERISA and COBRA, FMLA, FLSA, there's the ACA. So really, there's an acronym for everything, and we do our best to keep up to date on all of those issues and how they impact our members. So our website is full of resources on everything you need to know to be a better business owner, to manage your employees, and to stay compliant. You know, internally we kind of think that maybe 100% of our members are non-compliant in some area, and it's not because they don't want to be or because they're not doing a good job as a business owner. It's because you just don't always know better.
So there are new compliance issues that are coming up based on how we are constructing our workforce. People want to work from home, they want to work flex time, they want to have access to their personal devices. What kinds of things would you tell a business owner that has to tackle these new modern workplace types of issues?
Our best advice is to have an employee handbook, put it in writing, communicate all of your policies with your employees, have them sign the document that says, I read this and I understand it, and make sure that you're keeping those policies as up to date as possible by consulting an HR professional or an attorney. And you know, SBAM members have access to some free resources through our Ask an Expert portal on our website, which is also a really great resource. So I just really recommend making sure that you are effectively communicating your policies with your employees.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Lisa Smith, and this is Focus on Business. Here with me today is Jeff Detloff, Phil Zeller, and Mike Burns, all experienced business leaders in technology, human relations, and employee management. Our topic is the modern workplace. So let's start with you, Jeff. Can you give us a clear definition of what is the modern workplace?
Right. So it's a recognition that people today can work anytime, anywhere, from using any device. The notion that you have to go to an office and you have to sit there to collaborate with people is old school. Okay, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, technology has driven the paved the way, so to speak, to allow workers to work anywhere. Everybody's carrying a mobile device. Everybody's carrying their laptops, they're going to the coffee shop and whatever. So this presents some challenges for business leaders on how to control both the technology and the productivity of those workers.
How are employers feeling about this? I mean, I know that there's a very, very scattered, fragmented approach to working today. I come from old school where, you go to work and then you leave work.
Right.
So I think it presents a challenge.
It does, Lisa.
Yeah.
You know, you look at this day and age right now, we have a talent war going out there, a talent shortage. We all know this globally. We know it here in Michigan, and we know the challenge is real. So as business owners and employers look, they're asking themselves, how do I get talent? How do I retain talent? And how do I make these people productive in their organization, which I have? And really looking at the focus of the organization. I think the key to all of this is understanding this, is understanding what business are you in and what do you need your people to produce. And if you understand that and you understand and do a root cause analysis, then ask yourself, each of your people, and again, I'll defer to Mike on this from the HR perspective, of what role do they have, and really from a leadership standpoint is what result do I want? And so focusing on that, leveraging technology, leveraging the HR team, and leveraging the folks around us to make sure we produce the business results as we need to as organizations is critical to our success.
And yet still, as employers, there's a lot to figure out. What are you seeing in terms of employers figuring it out, banding together? How are they approaching this new workplace?
What's fascinating here in Michigan is that Michigan really leads in a lot of these areas, especially as you head to West Michigan and look at the Talent 2025 initiative, in which all of the major corporations are coming together and realizing we have a talent shortage. And rather than fighting each other for talent and developing people, they've come together to look at different initiatives to bring all these people together to share the resources and the expenses of trying to bring people here to Michigan.
Sounds like a positive coalition.
It's a beautiful thing, and I mean, right now I know that Mike, you've done a lot of research in this area, right?
Yeah, we're just, as I mentioned earlier, finishing up a alternative work schedule survey, and our data shows 66% of the employers have some form of alternative work schedule program. They, of course, approach it from a work-life balance, but employers, being business people, also look at it as a return on investment. Take this morning. I walked into my office at 8. I'd already been in contact on our emails and our systems with several people that morning, and there was just one other person in my office, but we were conducting business as usual through the use of devices and from our locations. Our surveys show not only a large number of alternative work scheduling programs, but the use of all sorts of electronic devices that allows us to do there. This creates some challenges for the employers, not only from a return on investment, but from a security and from a legal standpoint even as well. So a lot of advantages and some disadvantages that go to this that employers have to work their way through.
Before we go that far, you were talking a little earlier before we rolled tape about there's multiple ways that we name the way that people work, not just full-time, part-time, 1099. There's telecommuting, there's work from home. You said
Flexible work schedules.
Yeah, can you give us that laundry list of all of the things that you're tracking these days?
Sure can. The big three are telecommuting, flexible schedules, and part-time schedules, okay? But then from there you can go into job sharing, you can go into paid dependent leave as an alternative work schedule, believe it or not. Phased retirement programs are coming online. Phasing in and out of leaves of absences, where people say, I'm going to work for 4 or 5 months, and then I'm going to go down south for the wintertime, I suppose. Shift flexibility. Summer and seasonal hours are big. It's great when you can put in a 4-day week and then get Friday off during the summertime, and employers are taking advantage of that and putting those programs in place to the benefit of the organization as well as the employees.
It's fascinating. I'll take the one where you take winters off and you go to Florida. Right. You mentioned this idea of devices. I know that that's a big topic around people who are not in an office where it's a very controlled environment. Jeff, what's happening with devices?
So everybody wants to use whatever device they want to use, right? And we want them to do that. But there's a challenge with the security, okay? If I have control of that device, I have control of where that data lives, and I put the data where I want to put it. And let's say I put it somewhere and then I go off on this winter, not vacation, but leave of absence or whatever, and other people don't have access to that data. So from a business leader's perspective, there needs to be very strict controls over where you're going to put your data and who has access to it. And this gives us that level of security as well, because then we can enforce two-factor authentication and other things so that the data that lives in the cloud is not being accessed by someone who doesn't have authority to access it. So there's the, I want you to have your own device because I don't have to buy it sort of thing. But the best way of controlling it is the employer provides the device and all the controls, and then it's a fully controlled environment.
Yeah, because we've all seen these stories on TV, right? The ransomware and everything else. They've brought organizations to their knees, and by locking it all down from a technological standpoint, you're stopping the points of entry that those hackers can get into. Correct?
Right, so that's the best way to do it, but it's not always the most cost-effective way to do it. And so those are considerations that have to be taken as well.
That's so I'm hearing you say this, and yet my office computer I can use to log into lots of different systems that send me alerts to different devices. Any device I have will get the same alert whether it's personal or business. Does that affect how we're working?
It doesn't necessarily affect how you're working, because as long as you're being productive. I mean, that's what the goal of the business leader is. I'm going to do what's best for my organization. I'm going to give them the right devices securely, but my main goal is to get them doing their job. And when they're working outside the office, that's a challenge, right? Okay, so defining what good looks like for that person, holding them accountable to get that number or those numbers, the things that they have to do, and that goes to the human relations, because these people are not part of a team necessarily. They're off on their own doing their own thing, and how do we motivate them and keep them productive?
And the key is looking at what is the person's results for the organization. Oftentimes we focus on job description. It's not so much the job description. We need that for legal compliancy. What we're really concerned about as business leaders is I need this person to produce these results. We pay them a wage, we need these results. Where can they produce these results? Is it here in the office? Then I need them here. Could it be at their home? Okay, well, maybe I should open up my mind and say maybe that's an option. So it really depends on the business you're in and each position in the company, where does it fit? So when you do a root cause analysis of the results you want from that individual, then you leverage the technology, whether it be Microsoft Teams or whether you're using Zoom or any other type of conferencing type software integration to bring these people in. Remember, from a human relations standpoint, it's that we hire this person to produce results. That's what we want at the end of the day. As a CEO, that's what I want. I want results. So how do I help this person to show them to take a genuine interest in understanding that what they do each day produces results for our organization, and that they're part of something bigger than themselves? If they understand that and they can tie what they're doing to that, it allows us to give them more flexibility, because then they don't need as much management. So that goes back to the individual. And if you go back to your HR department, they have a lot of assessments and other tools that they can use to help you understand if this person has the capacity to be a trailblazer and work on their own without supervision. There are tendencies that they can track through their assessment ability. Or is this person need somebody there? Because some people really do need somebody there. They need to be in an office environment.
Need and want.
You got it.
So this isn't for everybody. There are people
Correct.
who prefer to have that collaborative environment. There are people who want to have a boss who says this every day, this is what good looks like. If you do these things, you're doing well, and they need to have that presence in the office. Okay, so let's say you've decided that you're going to offer these particular kinds of work offerings. So it's part-time, one day a week you get to be at home, and the rest of the time you're in the office, and then we're also going to do a seasonal thing. So how do you manage that from an HR perspective? Is there policies? What happens if it doesn't go well? What happens if it goes well with one employee but not another employee? How do you handle that as an owner?
Yeah, it'd definitely be unwise to announce on Friday, hey, guess what we're doing next week? You're all going to work from home, and I've got these devices we're going to connect into. Have at it. No, there needs to be guidelines, there needs to be procedures and so forth. One thing I was going to mention earlier is, with all this talk of productivity, we're talking like everybody's not an exempt employee who has all the time of a week to do something. When you when a non-exempt employee engages, an hourly employee engages with their cell phone, they're working. That is hours worked. That must be compensated for. So having somebody tied to their phone doing work at 7 or 8 at night, that is compensable time from a wage and hour standpoint. So those types of things need to be clearly delineated in a policy when you can pick up on it. If they pick up on their phone just because it's convenient to get a head start on the day, they're working. You got to pay for them. And those are hours worked that need to be recorded for wage and hour purposes as well. So employers need to be careful about what they introduce in their workplace so that they stay out of the way of the wage and hour and the other compliance agencies out there that keep an eye on employers.
So can you say then, you can have email on your phone, you're an hourly employee, don't check it or respond outside of your allotted business hours if you have set hours?
Yes, and this is where it gets kind of dicey. I mean, as employers, we love that kind of engagement and productivity. But if you're not compensating for it, the plaintiff's attorney love to hear that, particularly in larger organizations where they can set up a nice little group lawsuit and go after an employer. So it's not just the enforcement agencies that are out there to watch, it's also the attorneys who want to help the employee get what they deserve, which is the compensation for the time they put in for the employer. And that is can be, as we've been discussing, 24/7, 365 if you don't have rules to say, no, you are not to pick up messages or you're not to work outside of this time there. And what are we talking about? So we're talking overtime, and that's a direct personnel cost on our financial sheets there. You got to control that. It might say, well, I don't want to I want to cause somebody to be disengaged and put them down for working, but if you don't have the budget to pay for that time, it can be a little eye-opener at the end of the month or the end of the year in terms of overtime cost.
Right, and that email thing is a big deal because people are doing it just as a matter of course, and even the employee might not know that they're doing it, and if it's not written down and everybody's communicated that you can't do it, then you could get in trouble without even knowing it. And one of the ways that technology can help is we can shut down their email. For specific workers, their email is active from 8 to 5, and that's it. It doesn't, so mail is accumulating, but it's not going to be delivered until the next morning.
Interesting.
And I do want to share something, Lisa, because you're onto something here. You would think with all the technology it would become easier in our current generation. It's actually becoming much more complex. There's more legal HR things to deal with than before. There's more technological options than before. And the challenge that I see for businesses and business leaders is we're not communicating enough. We need to communicate much more with what's going on, why it's going on. Because today's savvy employees are looking for purpose. I can't stress that enough. They're all looking for purpose. And they need to hear from the leadership of the organization, this is why they're valued and this is what our organization does. Look at all the great companies out there. Look at all their advertising campaigns for the greatest companies that attract these great employees. They're serving a nobler motive. So we as organizations need to understand what our nobler motive is, how our people make a difference in that motive, communicate that effectively, always, often. You can never over-communicate the positive. Let me say that again. You can never over-communicate the positive, especially in the world in which we live. We're being inundated with negativity all the time. So as business leaders, stress the positive, hold people accountable to the things and the differences that they make through their skills that they bring to the table to show them a direct correlation of how what they do makes our organization better. And that requires constant communication. You can't just dump a job description on somebody and say, oh, look, you're employed. I give you a paycheck. You should do a great job. That is old school thinking. It would be nice if it still worked. I know for some of my friends, they'd say, Phil, why doesn't it work that way? I'd say because we're in the 21st century now and things have changed. So leveraging the technology, understanding what your business you're in, working with your HR professionals to make sure you're compliant and complicit so you don't run the business out of business is critical. And what I love about the technology is we must understand too, a lot of people in business look at technology as an answer. It's not an answer. It's a conduit. It's a vehicle to be used to get your organization from point A to point B. It is not an end solution. Unless you're in the technology business like Jeff is, selling technological solutions, helping organizations, for him it's how he makes his income. For myself and for Mike, it's what we need to do to be successful in our organizations. We need people like him.
Right, and the technology piece helps with that communication if it's done right. Mm-hmm. So old school is we're all having a meeting and we're talking face to face, but now there's different generations in the workforce. They're texting, they're emailing, they're using Skype or Teams or one of these other tools, and there needs to be leadership in that area as well to define these are the tools that we're going to use. Don't use this one over here just because you like it or somebody gave you a hint to go try it. Stick within the program and use the tools effectively. Use the right tool.
And I hear everything you're saying. It all is a perfect formula for perfection. Running a small business is a little bit of a hairball sometimes. Communication is key, policy is key. However, we also have to run our company, so there's a mix of what we have to do there, to sell. I just want to point out that there's a lot of information in your survey. There's a lot of resources from your organization as well, that if you want some ongoing information from the American Society of Employers, you can sign up for Everything People this week and get a little bit of that HR help. The Small Business Association of Michigan also has wonderful HR resources, and I want to thank you all for being here today. Denise, it's a tight labor market. And it's a robust sales market. People need to hire anyway.
Right.
From a legal perspective, what should we be thinking about?
Well, we have a modern workplace, and we can use that to our advantage now. There are a lot of digital platforms for hiring candidates, and we can use the tools that they have to much more streamline and weed out the bad candidates through questionnaires online and looking at their job history. So we can use that technology. And another thing that you can do to be very preventative, and this is risk management at its very best, is to take a look at social media. That's one thing that you're not seeing on the job platforms. Take a look at your final candidates and go to their social media pages and see what they present themselves as voluntarily, so that you're not maybe making a bad hire or taking on a candidate who's not a good fit for your workplace. It's much easier to not interview and not hire a candidate than it is to have to fire them once they've been hired. So preventative maintenance, preventative measures, always a better idea.
Social, it's such a helpful tool in the hiring process. I agree today. Thinking about this new modern workplace, what internally, in terms of policies and procedures, from a legal perspective, should we be looking at, and as what we're doing in-house?
When you're looking to hire, especially if you're looking to scale up and hire in large numbers, you must absolutely take another look at your employee handbook. Always be reviewing that to make sure that you're taking the modern workplace into account. Digital security, privacy considerations, all of the online and digital business that we do nowadays, you need to make sure that your employee handbook has been modernized as well to take all of those new tools and technologies into account.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Focus on Law, brought to you by Policella and Associates, PLLC.
Hi, Jeannie.
Hi.
Hi. So in a recent study by the Financial Brand, technology was one of the top priorities for bankers.
Absolutely. As we look at our customer base and we see younger and younger people who are starting to open up a new account, that's what they care about. They want convenience. They want to be able to look at things online. That's all they know.
How does that affect branches? Are branches going away?
Branches aren't going away because people, when they have that burning question, they want to walk in and they want somebody to answer it for them. And so I find that branches are still important.
And a notary.
And a notary.
Yeah. When you need a notary, you go to your bank.
That's right.
So how does the technology demands, what does that look like from a business owner's perspective on a bank?
Very similar. Business owners care about convenience, and it's important for them to have that convenience. So for example, if you're a business owner that's taking in checks, they don't want to have to run to the bank to deposit those checks. They want to be able to scan those deposits through remote deposit capture and know that that's taken care of somewhere else. They want to be able to look up balances online. They want to be able to pay their employees online. All of those conveniences are extremely important to the business owner.
Excellent stuff. Let's just talk a little bit about you and that modern young employee. What's your experience there?
My experience has been, it's fun and it's very exciting, but the new young modern employee really wants to be mentored. It's important for them to have that one-on-one time. They are dying to learn, to grow, and to move up in the organization.
And you offer that?
I do.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for being there for them, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Focus on Banking, brought to you by Michigan Bankers Association.
Jeff, there's a lot of employees who are working not inside the office, remotely, in this new modern office environment. What are some of the security challenges that you would suggest we pay attention to?
Right. So it's all about the data and who has access to the data and who has control of the data. And what we want to do is make sure that the organization has control of the data. Users who are creating the data or getting it through their email or finding it someplace are going to store it in the most convenient place, and that's typically on their local system. They're just used to doing that. It's harder to take the energy to store it somewhere else.
So that's on their desktop, on their iPad, on their phone,
Correct.
Whatever,
Wherever.
Personal.
Yes, and so that's dangerous because if that worker ends up leaving the organization or if that device gets compromised, stolen, lost, then that data is at risk. So we need to make sure that the data is stored where we tell people to store it, in the cloud. So the second thing is when people are storing stuff or sharing things in the cloud, they often share it with a link. Okay? And that link, if they don't understand the control of that data, they might create a public link. So they're sharing the data with their colleague, and it becomes publicly available to whoever has the link, which would be bad. Okay? And then the third thing is the access to that storage location in the cloud, whether it's Microsoft Cloud, Google Cloud, Box, whatever, it needs to have a second factor of authentication for the person that's logging in. So I log in, I use my username and password, and it lets me in. So if somebody compromised my password, stole it, then they can sit wherever they're at in the world, and they're me, and they access that data, which is not good. So as an organizational leader, we need to make sure that all three of those things are in place so that our data is controlled.
So you're saying they know the username because it's usually your email address, so then all they need is the password.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. So what then would be the first step in controlling that data?
So we need to turn on that second factor authentication, and all of the cloud services have it. People are reluctant to do it because it's hard, but it's not. You just need the typical way to do it is with a cell phone, an app on the cell phone, or it's a text message to the user, and then simply enter username, password, and that second factor of authentication. And that is going to keep the data safe.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Focus on Tech, brought to you by Providence, making technology easier.
The modern workplace is a complex topic. Hopefully today's show will help you manage the impact on your organization.